Hello, welcome to Worship Tutorials. I'm Bradford, and I'm so excited to be showing you my rig. This has been a long time coming. Yes, there are going to be probably a handful of questions that I'm hoping to, if you watch this whole thing, hoping to answer throughout this video. One is probably going to be, I thought you were a Helix guy. I am. I thought you liked Kemper. I do. I thought you used Quad Cortex. Absolutely. Quad Cortex actually is my preferred modeler of choice nowadays. But I'm a pedal guy. Pedals through and through. I love them. I don't know what it is. It's even though I use this thing, this is an RJM Mastermind PBC 10. Even though I use this to control stuff and rarely actually need to touch the pedals, still feels different than using a modeler. Most often though, I do run this into my Quad Cortex for dual amps. That's my in stereo. That's my choice. But this rig was put together by Browne Million Audio, based out of the Guitar Sanctuary in Texas. This board is a Vertex, I think it's called a Tour Elite, but I'm just kind of Tour Elite. Elite Tour Elite, whatever their biggest board is. That's what this is. It is hinged. The pedals underneath here, I don't need access to, which is why they're underneath here. Because they're the Katana 4-jack mod. So in other words, it's each side is separately controlled. The Protein, which is my favorite drive, is like a TRS control. So TRS cable on the left controls blue, TRS cable on the right controls green, and it splits to 2 1/4-inch cables for the switcher. The POG is actually MIDI, and it's actually like in one of my insert loops. It's not even in a loop. Because of where I've wanted it in the chain, it just made more sense to put it there so I didn't lose. There's a lot more technical stuff we could get into, but I won't bore you. Essentially, I have it set to a button so I can bypass it, and I can select presets, which is really cool, really helpful. On top here, you can see some things. This is not in a loop, the Vertex Steel String Supreme. It's kind of like my more gooder clean tone thing. It does add some drive, but like if you're playing really soft clean parts, it really just makes them more present, compresses them, and keeps things real even. So it's almost like having a second level of compression in a way, which I'm going to utilize with slide because I use the Cali. That stays really clean. All this stuff is like all of my favorite things on one pedal board. And for a guy who likes variety is the spice of life, and I feel like I live in that life. I love variety. And for a guy like me to say this is like all my favorite stuff on one rig, let's anchor down the cables, the power cables, the audio cables, all that, and like let's make it look as pretty as possible and I won't touch it. Like that seemed like a big deal. But and some of you may feel the same way. But this is squeaky. But this is my favorite stuff. All here, ready to go. I've been dialing in presets on the BigSky for a few years. I have like the same 4 or 5 delay presets that I typically only use on the EchoSystem. I have some stuff dialed in for the Zoia. The preamp here, so cool. I occasionally will make tweaks depending on the guitar, and it's not that hard because I can see the settings, as you will see. Like, look at that. I can see the settings. So all my favorite stuff right here. I'm going to start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. Anyways. Here is my Sir Custom. It is a Mercedes Blue Metallic, actually. I haven't talked much about it on the channel yet. It's got Mike Landau single coil pickups and an Asato bucker. I love it. I like the Thorn bucker, but this is a little more, to me at least, open, lower output, more my speed. I don't know what they do, the magic they do to get this balance. The balance between single coils and humbuckers can be tough, and how they did the wiring is insane. It's got the single or the silent coil system. It's not dead quiet. That's almost impossible anyways. Like it's gonna have, when I add gain, it's gonna sound like it's got something going on, but it's still, I mean, that's pretty impressive. Normally you hear something and you have to go like in between positions to not hear anything. Thing's annoying. So we're running out of this patch bay into 2 amps. Bad Cat Cub 340. The matchless Samson era for the Clout C30, and both of them are running with the aux box. So nothing fancy, you'll hear me talk about the Longline here in a second. Nothing fancy with that right now. That's helpful for other things. Run 1/4-inch out straight into the amps, and then the aux boxes are taking the speaker load, and we're running those into Logic, and that's what you're hearing. I'm going to start here because there's some nifty gifties right here. Nifty gifties. Guitar. there is a send and return and a power jack to audition something. We'll come back to that in a second. And left and right send. So I can just run my whole board. All my cables right here, minus power. Power is right there in the back corner. But let's come back to this insert loop, this audition loop. Brian and I were talking. He made this a TRS jack. So this is cool. My thoughts were that if I was going to put anything in here, the biggest thing would probably be the hologram microcosm. And it sounds so good in stereo. It's got like a space knob, which is like verb. And so we turn these into TRS jacks. So I run TRS to TRS because it's a TRS insert in, and then a split 1/4 inch back to TRS here. So I can put that pedal in stereo, and it goes right before the delay and reverb. And there's a little power thing right here. Very cool. I also use this for when I'm running my wireless. I can just run the power off of this for the wireless receiver, and then I go 1/4 inch from that straight to this patch bay. Super cool. Another cool feature is because it's right before delay and reverb, I could put an ACS1 or an Iridium, Ruby, the Dream. I could put like the Ruby and the Dream setup in here in the loop, basically, and put it. It'll be in the PBC, but I'd like leave that loop on, and like then delay and reverb would be after. I could alternatively just run those amp pedals out of the side jacks here, but if I wanted them in between, so it's really cool. But let's go back underneath real quick. I have the Goodwood Audio Longline, and today we're running into amps, but we're using the aux boxes, just a little easier for this. We'll get to using rail amps with this eventually. The Longline, super versatile. Such a cool thing. It just came out not too long ago. This is January 23. It came out like fall 22. It's got a pad, it sums, it can lift the ground, or it can swap phase. You can also run the XLRs off the backside here. You can do one of two things. You can treat it like, you know, the radio SGI boxes. And then I have this little box. It's small, it's like 2 inch by 2 inch. I'll run XLRs where my amps are gonna be. That box will then convert it to 1/4 inch, and I can run that to my amps. I can do that. Or if I run, you know, any of the amp sim pedals in the loop here, that can run XLR to front of house. I don't need a DI. That is my DI. Super cool. Thank you, Goodwood, for helping me with that as well. But right out of this patch bay, we go straight to the Cali 76. I run that. That's always on for me. I'd say it's pretty subtle. Here is it off, just the bass tone. Let's turn verb off, and here it is on. So I get amps like edge of breakup, and I back them off a little bit, and then I like to use this to push. It's different to me. Could I get the amps sounding like they sound without the Cali? Absolutely, but I like how that feels with something goosing the signal. I could really dive deep into this thing, but I'm running it at 18 volts, and then it hits the PBC. The PBC loops are Keeley left and right, Protein left and right. This is the Kilt, and the Kilt actually, you'll see here, currently the LED is blue, but Brian hooked this up, so when I hit this, red remote. So here's the Kilt normally. I kind of treat it as like my hard clipping option, like my distortion, right? But here it is with the red remote. So I love the Kilt. Now, if I were to take the Kilt out, then obviously that switch wouldn't be doing anything, unless I guess there's a pedal that could probably benefit from that. But that's cool. The PBC can send functions like that out. Let's go back now. Keeley. I run the yellow side as kind of like, there's something magical about the Keeley. The way it can fatten things up and just make things warm, but the drive on it still feels like it's not woolly. So here's my neck tone. Here's Keeley. It's like almost like you can't tell it's on, but listen to this bridge. Like, it just does something different for me, and it's like a nice way to push. And so the yellow side of the King of Tone and the blue side of the Protein, even though they're both blues breakers, the King of Tone has been so tweaked that it just does something different. It sounds different. It kind of gives me something different that, you know, the Protein can get more glassy, which is kind of more true to form. Here's the red side of the King of Tone. I use this, and I will, but it's not a sound that I desire much more than any of my other higher gain stuff. The King of Tone is very reactive. The more drive you add, the louder it gets. The less drive you have, the more volume you got to push. The more gain you add, the brighter it gets. The less gain you have, the more you got to push it. So the yellow, the tone is dimed, and it's still pretty dark. But it's because I have the drive solo. So it's really interactive and reacts pretty much like I'd expect an amp to anyways. Here's the blue side of the Protein. Now, to be honest, I know like for a lot of people, even people who may consider themselves like seasoned musicians, you may think that the stuff sounds pretty similar, but to me it feels different. And so some of it's about the sustain and like the saturation I feel under my fingers, and I use that differently, and it's gonna come through more and actually playing parts than it is coming through me just playing chords. But here's the green side of the Protein. I find, and Dave Browne is the man. First off, Browne and the Gain are incredible. I love those guys, and like they're like always willing to help me check out some new stuff. The Protein though is like, it's my go-to. That's my sound. If I had to get rid of all drive pedals but one, it'd be the Protein I'd keep. Keeping the gain on the green side below noon and even like around 9 o'clock, even lower, is kind of the sweet spot to me. It's like an ODR1 variant. So I really, really love Protein. Have I said that I love the Protein? Nick, have I said that yet?
I can't remember.
Okay, well, I love the Protein, and coincidentally, I also love Protein, like steak. I really think they should make a steak pedal, and it'd be the Bradford signature pedal. Dave, if you're watching, I'm pitching that now. Yeah, so those are my drives. You heard the Kilt. Actually, those are not all my drives. This is actually, I forgot. See, I'm still learning this thing. After the Cali, it actually goes to the preamp. The preamp is controlled via MIDI, so it's out of the loop also. I try to be really intentional about how I did this because I didn't see myself running this later. When I use a tube screamer, for example, which you can get using the silicone diode on this. When I use a tube screamer, I really like to use it to push an already driven sound. So let's say I'm using the green side of the Protein. And I want more. Right, actually, coincidentally, I'm on a tube screamerish kind of sound here. Let's turn. So you can hear it thins out and it gets a little nasally. So I use the preamp in that way. I also use it for like big gain sounds. Man, where's it at? Right here. This is one I use for almost like a distortion. We did Carol the Bells at Christmas. This was like the main sound. I used it with my PRS Special, so the pickups are a little hotter, but that saturation just gave me more of what I was wanting. I could have stacked the Protein and it would have worked fine, but there's just something about this gave me a little bit more. I love the Benson preamp too, so this thing operates that way. That's how I like to use it in some ways too. So it's a great stacking tool, so it's great that it's first. After we go through the drives, it goes Kilt, and this actually is after that. This is the Steel String Supreme. I'm still learning it. This has been one of the first pedals that I couldn't just turn it on and go. I've had to learn how it works inside and out to try to really gather how to use it best. Like, I turn it on when I don't necessarily want drive, but I need my clean tone to be a little more prominent. And because it exists, I'm using it. It's killer. It also does a little bit of compression kind of thing, which kind of adds to it. It will add drive though. So here's like where I'm at now. And you may think like, well, how does that help with your clean tone? Well, let me show you. So here's some delay and play something. So it's like tightening things up. It's really more of a feel thing too, which I keep saying that, but that's important. I have the Katana. I've mentioned at least one time before, I'm a Mayer fan. This was the first iteration that Keeley did, I think it was 2020. And they said they were going back to kind of like the idea of the original Katanas. And so in this like John Mayer gear group I'm in, it caught everyone's attention and I couldn't hit order fast enough. Because I wasn't about to spend $500 on a Katana. They go between $300 and $500 for the originals. But the way this set, it's just pure. It's the same idea, honestly, to me, how I use it. It can give my clean just a little bit more. It's not like over the top. I have it set to just barely be above unity. I use it a lot to stack with drive pedals, but I love that thing. I think it converts to 18 volts too inside. If you pull this out, it gives you more gain. There you go. There you go. So there's that. Gosh, that volume pedal's annoying. After all my drives, I have the POG. The biggest way I use the POG2 that, like, I think people when they're like trying to decide what to do, they don't know about this, and one reason I like it. There's an attack filter. I love using the attack filter because I use it like a volume swell. And I actually find it really musical. When I was back when like the DL4 or the DD20 were your choices for delay, at least to me, and I had both because I've always been extra from day one. I've been over the top. Most people are like DL4 or DD20. I'm like, I use the DL4, and this is one reason why I use the DL4 for like the auto swell into the DD20. So I had delay because you couldn't do both. I guess the auto swell had delay on it. I don't remember now. I was always extra. That's all that matters. So I do that. I also really, really like using the POG2 as a subtle lower octave for like a solo. Before we get to the volume pedal, I have the Gravitas. Gravitas, that is... I think if I could be so bold, I think that is probably like my signature thing. Like, I love trim, and so here's what I do. This button right here turns on the trim and selects my ramping setting, and this is actually in a loop. Opens the loop too. There's one button, and so I can turn it on whenever I want. I don't really program trim, at least not with this. We'll get to the Zoia, but here. I love it. It's good. So I'll use that kind of sound. If you've watched the last rig rundown, board rundown, sorry Jason Shadrick, in Premier Guitar. If you've watched it, you showed that I saw that I showed how I use it. I'll just show you again though, because it's cool, I think. If I'm playing a full-on section of a song and driving and we break down, there's like a band break and something, I'll hit it. I just love it. This will lead us right on in to my next pedal, the Zoia. The Zoia is my catch-all. Now, I utilize this as you might use an H90 nowadays, and it is, for being as expensive as it is, it's still cheaper than an H90. You basically, we'll dive into this in another video, probably. Basically, these buttons can do one of two things. They showcase your chain. You can see here, there's like two, that's stereo in, this is stereo out, and these are all my parameters I can change for the chorus. You can set up virtually anything. Any kind of loop, or I'm sorry, any kind of block you can think about that the Helix has, the Empress, same idea. Like there's compression, there's versions of drives, there's modulation of any kind, there's all the wet effects you can imagine. You can get real nerdy and work through different kind of filtering things. You can set things, little buttons that control parameters, a la Chase Bliss stuff, if you're familiar. I use this as my catch-all. This is my chorus, stereo too. Vibrato. I had to dial these in, so you don't just like, it's like, I had to create it from scratch, kind of. Okay, that's super cool, but I don't use it. I created this envelope filter because, gosh, gall it all if I don't love John Mayer. If I push it with the Katana, it sounds even more like John Mayer. Here's a drone. This has been some of the stuff I've really wanted to show people. This drone it's not necessary. Could I make my BigSky sound and do a drone sound? Absolutely I could, but it's not quite the same as having the 100% wet drone first and then sending it into delay and reverb again. So I have like a drone verb set on here, and I used to use that until I started using the Zoia for it. So here's just the BigSky drone verb. And that's 100% wet, but like it's not as big as it could be because there's no delay carrying it on. So I have the Zoia to do that, and let me show you just that. All right, I just turned it off because it would go on forever. But I use that pretty regularly, just when you need a little something. You don't need a pad. Like Keys Player could play a pad, but those tend to be thick. We don't need that. We need something airy. That's what I go for. Okay, so after the Zoia goes into my EchoSystem. EchoSystem has been, man, once I tried it one time on a whim, and I was like, nah, I need the timeline, I need the screen. And then I couldn't get the sounds of it out of my head. And so I had to get it again because it sounds so good. This tape delay is like exactly what I want out of a tape delay. So like, I honestly could live just with those two delay sounds. I have like an analog that I really like. That's moody. Here's like a dual delay because you can run two algorithms at once. You can run them in series if you want, or you can send one out the left side and one out the right side if you want. So, like, a lot of people's gripe with the timeline is that you can only run one algorithm. If Strymon released a timeline that was more expensive because it had more DSP, I would totally understand why they had to charge more. It's like a thing. Like, chips are not cheap, and that's what you would have to do. I would consider it, maybe. The EchoSystem sounds great, and that right there, I'm running a reverse delay. Goodness, do I love reverse delay, into a tape delay, because I want the tape delay to like repeat the reverse side of things too. I don't want only reverse. If you run a tape delay into reverse, you're not going to hear as much of the tape because the reverse is going to catch it. Are you following? So I love this sound. I used it a lot when we used to do tremble. Here's another cool ambient preset, and we'll move on. BigSky, at this point in the game, I mean, you've got to know what it sounds like, right? I'm going to show you one thing because it's the BigSky. You don't need me to show you. It's good to have things that inspire you. I'm pretty stoked about this. I have been. The fact that everything's tied down. Brian Amelian does such great work. He soldered everything. All this stuff, I just feel more confident in the rig. Creation was kind enough to supply the cables and the plugs for that. The board was supplied by Vertex. And some of the MIDI stuff, I think, was also actually all... I think Mason did the MIDI stuff. But this stuff, very, very helpful if you're playing a lot, you're grabbing your rig a lot and moving it. I think that's, having, I guess that's really most people. If you're able to do that but if you're changing pedals out a lot, or you're having to carry your gear across places, like you're not touring, but you're also not just like sitting at home all the time, or the board's not just staying at your church. Anything you can do to eliminate points of failure. I show up someplace if I'm getting paid and it's like, I want to know that my rig's going to work. We're going to get into more of like why you would want to do a rig like this, or what it looks like. Because, Brian, great guy. He'd love to do your rig, but he also likes helping people understand how to do it himself. So we're going to do something with him just so you can get a little more insight into that and kind of just get some ideas. You'll see pictures too. You can see how these cables are laid out. He's got some practices that I could be here even longer than I am currently if I were to explain to you what's going on here. But more in-depth kind of like sound samples, and more like, we'll dive into some pedals a little bit more. We'll do some stuff like that. But if there's something we didn't answer, drop a question below. Let us know. If you got a question, maybe we can answer it that way, or maybe it's something that warrants a video. Let us know that way. But otherwise, so very grateful to Million Audio, to Vertex, to Creation, to Goodwood, RJM, wonderful, wonderful people. Thank you so much, everybody who's made this happen. And thank you for checking this video out. Subscribe, ring the bell. As YouTubey as that sounds, like, you're probably subscribed to a lot of channels. So ringing the bell lets you know when one of our videos goes up so you can watch it. But let us know, again, what other kind of content you'd like to see from this rig. Thank you for joining us. Maybe it took your whole lunch break. I hope you would find that it was well worth it. But have a great day.